1.3 million people starving in Madagascar. You are probably thinking, WTF, people starving in Madagascar? It's a paradise. People aren't starving in paradise. Well, it turns out that you've got these parts of Madagascar and parts that look like this. Facts time! This island has around 30 million inhabitants. About 75% of them live under the poverty line. 8.8 million are food insecure. The USDA defines food insecurity as a lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. And probably the worst statistic on this whole list is that 39.8% of children are stunted. Stunting is when a child has a low height for their age. This can have effects on the immune system, brain function, and organ development. And now we are gonna zoom into the south. There are bandits, corruption, deserts, starving people, a few bigger cities, virtually no roads, and almost no interest from the central government. Or is there? Okay. About 3.5 million people live here and don't really have that many means of agricultural production. But let's rewind and look at the bandits in more detail. Bandits. They are called the Dahalu and are merciless. Dahalu are essentially gangs of bandits that steal all of the villagers' belongings, assault them on a regular basis, and sometimes go even as far as to mass murder a whole village. Then we have the corrupt local officials which cooperate with the Dahalu. Let's take a look at the main activity of this cooperation. Stealing zebu. The Dahalu raid a village and steal zebu, but to actually sell it on a market and make profit from that, they need paperwork. So they go to their corrupt buddy in the local government and make a deal with him. Then they sell the cattle and repeat the whole process. Since it's quite a profitable operation, the Dahalu are gaining power, and if nothing is done, it could lead to a civil war. A big part of southern Madagascar consists of deserts, and the overall climate is very arid. With climate change comes even less rainfall, so it's hard to grow almost anything there. Many villages are now depending on their farm animals to provide food for them. But when the Dahalu steal all of the animals, it's like a death sentence for the village. In some of them, people were, for example, eating only locusts or white clay for extended periods of time just to ease their hunger. When I first found out about this, I was like, man, that's screwed. And I bet you are thinking the same right now. Or maybe you are wondering where am I going with all this. Well, let me put it this way. I have designed a way how to tackle most of Madagascar's problems in one fell swoop. Yeah, that's right, I've got a plan to solve the food shortage in Madagascar, including the bandits. Here it is. Step 1 is to get some initial funding from the African Development Bank, the United Nations, etc. and use this funding to do research of farming about 15 to 20 Madagascar's most important crops and animals. Things like cassava, fish, rice, zebu, chicken and stuff like that. Step 2 is to design a low-tech production system for these crops/animals. For example, a low-tech aquaponics system for cassava and fish. Step 3 is to find out what villages or cities are most suitable for what production system. Step 4 is to get a giant amount of funding from either the African Development Bank, the UN, etc. Then use one part of it to build the infrastructure, so roads, railroad, solar panels, atmospheric water generators and stuff like that, and to use the rest to build the actual production facilities in these villages and teach the villagers or the citizens how to farm in these facilities. The final step is to establish a network of these farming facilities and food banks which will eventually manage the produce. The whole system would work like this. A village grows a crop. It keeps 1/20th of the total amount of the produce and sends the rest to the food bank. The same process happens with all of the other crops. The food bank will then send the village the other 14 to 19 crops and meats so that each villager can have a nutritious, healthy diet. Eventually, all of the villages will have access to all of the produce. To ensure that this would be a profitable business, the food bank would keep about 20 to 30% of the whole produce and sell this either to tourists or in the bigger cities. That's a quick overview of the idea. I would then like to implement black soldier fly farming in the bigger cities, to manage organic waste. As a result, there wouldn't be any diseases spread from that, and it's a cheap source of animal feed and plant fertilizer. One question remains: how to deal with the Dahalu? Since they are armed and violent, all of the operations would need to be protected by security teams, at least for the time being. I studied violence on a country level and discovered that the main source of violence are socio-economic problems. So basically, poor country or region equals more violence. So as time would go on, and people throughout the whole southern Madagascar would have enough food, jobs, and money, the violence would eventually cease. Subscribe for more.